Okay, well, welcome everyone. My name is Katie Meyer and I'm the Chief of Staff for Commissioner Mingus Maps. And we are here to talk about permitting and a couple, ground rules for tonight. We're here for an hour and we're going to do a Q&A after Commissioner Maps speaks, and then Commissioner Ryan gives a little presentation on what they've been working on, and then we're going to open up to a Q&A. And so if you want to ask a question, please just raise your hand, the hand icon, or you can type in the chat that you want to ask a question, and we will try to get through as many as we can in this hour. And we just appreciate everyone being here. And Commissioner Maps, would you like to start us off?
Sure. Well, hello, everybody. I see some familiar faces in the room and some new faces too. I want to thank you for coming out today. This is, I think, our first public meeting around a permitting task force that Commissioner Dan Ryan and I am working on. I don't want to talk for a long time today because we will have some dialogue, but I do want to set up our conversation by, number one, thanking you for being here. Over the course of the evening, I'll provide some comments that place this project into some context. Commissioner Ryan will provide some detail on the work being done by our permitting task force, and then we'll open it up for discussion. And I expect we'll spend most of our time today in dialogue. But before we get into the meat of the presentation today, I want to share with you a story about why I eagerly said yes when Commissioner Ryan invited me to participate in this task force. I'll tell you, as of today, I've served on council for 11 months and 13 days. And during this time, I've learned an awful lot, many important lessons. But one of the most important lessons that I've learned during my time on council is that as of today, I believe there are two problems which are significantly holding back our city's ability to economically recover from the COVID crisis. One, of course, is concern about public safety and livability. Here I'm talking about crime and houselessness, and council is doing important work on that. But the second issue, which I believe is currently holding back our city's economic vitality, is fear of the city's permitting process. I'll tell you, literally every day, businesses large and small tell me that they are reluctant to open up new businesses here in Portland because they are not confident that they can successfully navigate the city's permitting process. I've seen this with billion-dollar projects that would transform the city, and I've seen this with small mom and pop businesses that are trying to open up a bar or a bakery. We also hear this from the public on a daily basis and from the city auditor. Everyone is sending us the same message. The city's permitting process is broken. It takes too long to pull permits, and our customer service, frankly, needs improvement. As we'll learn tonight, there are many reasons for this. You know, I believe we have about 7 different bureaus that issue permits in the city. So instead of a one-stop shop, this is, if you want to get your permits for a project done, it's a 7-stop marathon. That's not okay. Each bureau operates under different rules and procedures for issuing permits, and there's no one ultimately in charge of this permitting process. There are other issues too as to why permitting is not working as it should here in the city, but we won't get into those at this moment, but we'll surely encounter those over the course of the evening. And now what I want to do is introduce my friend and colleague, Dan Ryan, the commissioner in charge of the Bureau of Development Services, including some, in addition to that, he has some other important roles that I'm sure you're aware of. Commissioner Ryan and I, as I've mentioned, have co-chaired a permitting task force for about 8 or 9 months now. Here to tell us more about some of the work that we've been doing on the permitting task force is my friend, Commissioner Ryan. Commissioner Ryan, welcome, and please tell us more.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner Maps. I'll never forget when I got the audit and I spent some time with the auditor. I knew that this had to be an all-in, all-council endeavor, and I couldn't think of a better co-chair. And I'm so grateful that Commissioner Mapp said yes. We're going to go over some slides just to set some context. And so I'm filling some space right now as we're waiting for the slides to come up. Is that correct? Yeah. There they are. It's magic. Okay, well, again, good evening. I'm really grateful that the fact that there's so many people at this town hall says a lot, and I appreciate all of you for being here. We're going to need you tonight and many months going forward as we continue to improve this. Portland City Council adopted 3 top priorities earlier this year. They're not surprising: houselessness, community safety, and if those 2 are going well, then that's going to help economic recovery. However, economic recovery is not going to be easy unless we finally focus on permit improvement as we are recovering our economy, to make it just easier for people who really love the city to do business in it. Our hometown, we're staying on the first slide at this moment, and I'll tell you when it's time to go to the next slide. Anyway, it's from homeowners making repairs to businesses making tenant improvements to definitely new construction. The city's permitting process, it impacts everybody. And I can't tell you if there's one issue that seems to bring everybody together that they'd like us to improve, it just happens to be permitting. My goal is to make this process, all of our goals, to make this process easier for Portlanders. And here's some updates on what we've gone through of late that we want to bring you into the current work. Next slide, please. So again, people often associate BDS, as Bureau of Development Services, as the permitting bureau, but in fact, there are 7 city bureaus involved in different aspects of construction permits. We have all their logos up there for you. I'll just briefly let you know that BDS is in charge of residential construction, commercial construction, trade permits, and zoning review. BES, that's environmental services, is around sanitation and stormwater sewers, and fire and rescue, sprinklers, alarms, escape routes. The housing bureau is definitely big with the multifamily buildings for exclusionary housing. We also have PBOT, which does curbs and sidewalks and right-of-way impacts. We have urban forestry and parks and rec around tree preservation and planting or replacement. And the Water Bureau are the connections to our vast city water system. Not all the bureaus involved in every construction permit, but many of our projects do involve at least one and sometimes all 7. So let's go to the next slide. Last March, as Commissioner Mapps indicated, after the city auditor released an audit that outlined all of these challenges with our permitting system and made recommendations for improvements. As the new city commissioner who was overseeing BDS and as a person who genuinely loves data, if we could stay on the same slide, yeah. I really was struck by the auditor's findings, which include some of the strong ones were that the city doesn't meet the timely goals that most cities and others meet. So we do stick out in that way. The city doesn't measure or report on activities it should. And the city doesn't follow policy for customer complaints. Challenges often are inequitable treatment of customers, and a stronger governance is needed to solve this systemic problem. What I think what struck me the most is these findings were not new. There was an audit done in 2003, and it had really similar findings. So the council really is coming together in support of improving this process, which has not been done before. And it's the shared accountability model that I really wanted to set after I read the audit, and I didn't want it to just be in our office or in BDS, and hence reaching out to Commissioner Mapps and then asking all of our council members to provide staff that will come to all of our task force meetings. So this isn't one that you could say has been siloed over the last 6 months that we've been working on this. Next slide, please. The permitting issues we're dealing with have obviously been around for a long time. Permitting bureaus had limited attempts at online permitting and plan review before the pandemic, but it was basically, there was limited action online. It was pretty much a paper-oriented system. COVID required permitting bureaus to bring our systems online very quickly, and there were many obstacles along the way, but these obstacles just of late, we're getting better reports that they're being overcome. COVID did teach us the urge to be urgent. We had to be urgent. We had no choice because no one could come in person. And so we did find that we were able to act nimbly and rapidly to overcome these barriers. And I really want to acknowledge all of the staff in the 7 permitting bureaus that figured out how to adjust the way that they interfaced with the clients during this time. The regulations are added. This is one of our other challenges. We have regulations that are added. We have new codes, but we're not really taking the time to clean them up when they're no longer useful or effective, nor do we think about how they work together, which causes confusion and delays. It's kind of basically clutter. There is not a comprehensive list. This is not a comprehensive list right now, but we want to leave you time to add to the concerns going forward. Why don't we go to the next slide? So it's definitely time for a new approach. Part of the challenge has definitely been the responsibilities across the bureaus and the commission form of government. And so you would have one commissioner in BDS probably throughout the last 3 decades has been wanting to do something about this, but many times it gets lost in that silo. So that was, again, one of my reasons for reaching out to Commissioner Mapps and getting all of the offices involved. Giving the history of permitting, the multiple bureaus involved, and our lack of a city manager is another way to look at it. So this is one where you could say that we have an excuse for the form of government we have, but you can also elect people like Commissioner Mapps and I that are willing to not be hung up on our bureau, but instead see this as a major priority and need for our city at this time. And our job is to work across bureaus and across offices to focus on this issue. I lobbied and secured a full commitment from the Portland City Council to hire someone for permitting improvement. That's the hiring of Terry Tyson, who is our permit improvement strategy manager. I just didn't think this would move without adding, having it resourced and having a professional that has a history of herding cats to move work. And so I'm grateful that we have that person on full time. And we have representatives, again, from all the different councils. We are working to recognize and commit to consistent practices and clarity about this information. Let's go to the next slide. Permit Improvement Task Force. So what we have done since we've come together, we really made it clear that the ease and efficiency of the permitting process is a key component of Portland's economic recovery. We all had to get on the same page that this would be a major driver in what the city can do for its part to improve our economy and make it come back better. And so that's why this was set up. We need to improve the information provided to customers so the city can more effectively assist customers in completing successful applications. The overall goal of the Permit Improvement Task Force is to reduce permit turnaround time by 1/3 and improve the customer experience. The more quickly we can get small businesses, affordable housing, residential improvements and modifications and new investments flowing, the more quickly we can rebuild our economy. So the Permit Task Force has really been focusing of late on improving the customer experience. And I just will say how helpful it was to do the recent customer service survey. Many of you maybe participated in that. It was powerful. And we spent time in the Permit Task Force going over the findings. And I want to thank again the employees for the courage they had to just sit through that and make sure that we really understood your concerns. So we're committed to providing a process that is accessible, that's clear, that's responsive, and ensuring safe and sustained development. And to do that, we really need to keep listening to the customers and keep adapting and learn from one another. Definitely learn from the customers. Let's go to the next slide. So these are some of the highlights. It's not a comprehensive list, but just before the pandemic, we did install Amanda. That's the permitting database was launched. It was supposed to be a 2-year rollout. The good news about COVID is it forced it to be a rollout that was immediate and necessary. The new permitting database is now used by all 7 permitting bureaus. The pandemic did accelerate the efforts for sure. And again, I want to thank the staff for being adaptive because now the good news is we are available online 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and the plans can be reviewed, updated, resubmitted electronically as well. So that's one of the brighter spots that has had a lot of kinks, but the good news is it's in motion and we are getting better results of late. The task force has been attended consistently since April, and the alignment is creating is unprecedented. I want to actually highlight that. I've been involved in a lot of task force in my life, and I've always noticed the first 1 or 2 meetings have a lot of great attendance, and then that attendance weighs down. And what I've noticed with this is that it's actually been sustained and the engagement has intensified. So I think what that indicates is that across all bureaus and all the participants, they're really leaning in and taking this seriously. And they also know that Commissioner Mapps and I are taking this seriously and that we're going to do something about it. Action is definitely the outcome here that we need. We need to definitely know that we don't need another audit in 10 years telling us the same thing. We need to move forward. And so I really want to say it's been great to see that type of enthusiastic attendance. And also, I'm really proud of the fact that in this alignment, we're building a data-driven culture. And when data is new to a culture, it can be really uncomfortable. We're just at the beginning stages of looking at real-time data, like how we're doing actually this year, as opposed to waiting for lagging information from an audit in another decade. And what we're noticing is that the employees are having dialogue about the data. They're going through that process of accepting what they're seeing is actually real. And it's every time I've been involved in a data-driven culture change, there's a process of going from a little bit of denial, if you will, to acceptance. And so we're definitely in that motion at the moment. And that just makes me really happy to see that. One of the first major efforts to come out of the task force is the alignment around expectations for consistent review and customer service. To that end, let's go to the next slide. Improving customer support. First of all, again, thank you for all those that participated in the survey we did in July. First of all, a lot of people participated. It was much higher than the industry standards, and the feedback was extremely helpful. Last week, we also conducted an internal town hall, and we had hundreds of permitting employees discuss improved customer service. And that was exciting to witness. And it was also noticed by many of the participants that all of the permitting directors from all of the bureaus were present at the training. And we had many people comment that that's the first time they've seen that type of an all-in effort on this problem that's been plaguing our city for some time. So, one of the jobs as leaders is to promote and support the culture change around something that's been weighing us down. And I really want to say that I can experience that motion is in place, and it's not easy. I also need to just give a little bit of empathy for the employees of the city of Portland at this moment in time. And I think it's with all workforces around the country for that matter, and especially here in Portland. People are experiencing some discontent on levels that we've never witnessed before in our city. There's a lot of anger, there's frustration, and many times the people that are in these jobs are some of the most front-facing employees of the city of Portland. They take those phone calls, they take those emails, and the fatigue and the anger and the frustration that's coming at them is overwhelming. So we are dealing with some fatigue around getting out of this backlog and this challenge. And I just want to thank all of you for remembering that we're all people and we've all been through a lot the last couple of years, and we really need each other. One of the things I keep saying when I have amazing conversations with Director Esau is that we're in this together. And that the reason why we want to focus on customer service and put a lot of effort into that relationship on the front end is because you need that relationship to carry the permit through to fruition. And so the more that we can build that trust on the front end, the better. And I'm seeing so much willingness from everybody at the city and all of the people that are working in this work and that are the frontline employees. Improving clarity in PBOT's right-of-way of requirements is just one example. But we can send more of those examples your way. And let's go to the next slide. Well, basically, it's now my chance to turn it back over to you, Katie, and you can facilitate the conversation from here on out. Here's just a couple of examples of the key questions. And really, we just want to know what should be the most important priorities for improving the city's permitting process. And what additional ideas do you want us to consider? We shouldn't think that we know all of those points at this moment. I'm just really grateful you're all here. I look forward to answering these questions the best I can with Commissioner Mapps. And most importantly, I want to take it all in so we can continue to improve the task force work, and that we know that we're in this together with all of you. The wall's coming down between the city and its customers, and that's what we're doing tonight, is bringing that wall down. So thanks. I'm really grateful to be here.
Thank you, Commissioner Ryan. So for people that have questions or comments, please go ahead and raise your hand, or you can put it in the chat. But we will start with Justin Wood. Justin, are you here?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yep, perfect.
Well, thanks for accommodating me. I had a conflicting meeting tonight, but I was glad I could at least join for a part of this. So for those of you who are not on the city council or staff, I sent an email off, just timing was today, to the city commissioners and some of the relevant staff, just talking about some of the permitting challenges that I've personally faced. I'm the past chairman of the Development Review Advisory Committee, and one of the things that we've been focusing on that I've personally been focusing on for years is the delays that we've faced related to public works permits. For example, we have 8 single-family houses that we submitted for permits on back in May. And while I'd like to see the permits out sooner, all 8 of my single-family permits were issued about the end of November. So a little over 5 months to get my single-family permits, which, shorter time would be ideal on that, but it's acceptable. However, we turned in for a very basic public works permit project, which is 20 feet of asphalt, about 200 feet long, around that same time. As of this time, we're hoping that the public works permit will be issued sometime in February or March, close to a year, just to get us a public works permit for that process. I'm not alone in that. A lot of times, if there's an associated public works permit project that goes along with the building permit project, the delays are not related to the building permit, they're related to the public works permit that's associated with it. And so I think that while we've tried to streamline processes related to building permits and take a look at the processes that are broken, something I've been working on for 15 years just on DRAC and various other things is trying to take a look at our public works process and how we can make that better. Just for a brief example for everybody, when you take even a basic project, you schedule your appointments, you meet with the public works bureaus, they do a 30% review where all the players are in the room. In my case, it didn't matter that everything was perfect on the plans. We really didn't have any corrections. The plans get taken in for the 30%. Then you go back home, if you will, back to your office. You reschedule for 3 months out for your 60% review, where the same people come back in the room and re-review it. And then at that point, if it's done well, you do it again at 90%. I can't fathom building permits. If you were to sit down with a plan reviewer and building permits, if they were to look at them and say, your plans look good, and then, 3 months later, they pull them off the shelf and look at them again. And then a couple months later, they do it again. It's just our public works permitting process was designed for large capital improvement projects. It wasn't designed for these small half street, small projects like this. And we need to be able to take a look at this. I build in jurisdictions all around the Portland metro area, and almost every single one of them can do a project like this within a month or two. And the fact that it takes us 9 months to a year is just an example of a completely broken process that we need to figure out how to address so that it gets permits out faster. In my case, all 8 of the houses we're going to build are going to be targeted to families making at or below the median family income, because we use the SDC waiver program. And there's 8 houses that are just sitting, not coming to market because we can't get through the process. So I appreciate you giving me the time to speak, and I'll take myself off mute, but I'm happy to answer any.
Commissioner Mapps, we didn't really talk about this part. So, hi.
Hey. Well, I need to investigate. I think we can commit as members of council and co-chairs of this project to look more closely into the public works piece of permits reform. I don't think that we spent a lot of time talking about this so far. And one of the other things that I want to say is this is going to be an iterative process. So Justin, why don't I make a commitment to you that we'll take a look at this, and I promise I have several staff members here. We will loop back to you to at least let you know where we're at with reforming the public works part of this. And I don't know if Commissioner Ryan or any staff members have anything.
Yeah, I think I would just add is that it's most important tonight that we really catch what you're saying, and then we have professionals throughout the city that the commissioner and I work with directly. Current stories that will be helpful not only to us to understand, but for those that are also listening. So I thought what you provided, Justin, was really helpful. Thanks for your written record earlier today. I haven't had a minute to look at my emails, but I look forward to looking at that soon. Thank you, Justin.
Great, thanks.
Hey, Dan, can I speak on a related question or related subject? So
Sure, I have no idea who said that, but
here,
Right.
Yes, and then we need to go in order. So.
oh yeah, actually, that's not my job. It's Katie. Sorry, Katie.
Well, Ray, is it on the same topic?
Stop, you're muted, Ray.
sorry, specifically, yes, it's exactly the same topic, just a little bit more information. Take a second. So one of the problems with that public works or the PBOT permit is that your building permit can be 100% ready to go, and PBOT will not release it until you can place a bond. But you can't place a bond until they tell you what the bond will be, but they can't tell you what the bond will be until they've done the 30% review. Even though everybody knows roughly what the bond should be, you can't even put in 10 times the bond to make sure you're not going to run and get your building permit. You just have to wait. So that's a very simple thing to fix.
Thanks, Ray. We will take this back to our work group, and I promise Justin that we'll get back to him, and we'll Ray will take your good suggestion under advisement too.
Yeah, and just as a note, and we'll talk about it later, but I've been waiting for a permit longer than you guys have been on the task force.
I believe you, Ray. I do, and you're not alone. So thanks for making that clear.
We're gonna go on to Ryan.
And who's scribing all the notes tonight from our staffs?
Yvette is from our staff.
All right.
So Ryan McKinster is next, and then Douglas McLeod is on deck.
Well, hi everyone. I'm Ryan McKinster. I'm actually the Policy and Government Affairs Director for the Home Builders Association of Metro Portland. Commissioner Mapps and Ryan, thank you for bringing this together. I really appreciate the efforts you're going through. I know how difficult it is. I've worked in multiple jurisdictions over the last 5 years with the same issue, and I know it's a big ship to turn. I did want to, before I make my few comments, I did want to mention the fact that I really appreciate working with Director Esau. She's been a real help in really trying to answer some of our concerns and keeping us updated on what you guys are doing. So I really appreciate that. And as you mentioned, her staff. I know they're the front lines. They're not responsible for some of the issues that we run into or the barriers or the slow times, but they're the ones that get the brunt of the frustration. So I just want to recognize that. I just want to make a few points. Justin hit on a large one. Justin is actually one of our members in something that's going on, but I also want to point out, and I think you referenced it, Commissioner Ryan, about kind of everybody coming together on the council to kind of direct this change. The one thing that we see is when there are competing interests across departments, there is no final arbiter. I'll make a very distilled example. There was a project where a house was set to go in, and there were some trees they needed to protect or work with regarding due to the urban tree program. However, PBOT had some requirements for where a driveway should go. And basically, if you were to comply with both issues, you would not have a developable lot. This is already, a little ways was, I believe, already after the building permit had been accepted, and it was partially down to the project was moving along. which is understandable, right? There's a lot of competing interests and a lot of regulations. However, without a final arbiter, it's basically two departments pointing at each other, looking for one to blink, to put it colloquially, to figure out how you're going to come up with that. And that seems to be an efficiency that needs to be looked at. There needs to be some final arbiter or some way to move it up. Other jurisdictions I've worked in, I know that has been a concern. A lot of times you have all this stuff under one umbrella, so you ultimately have a director, or in other jurisdictions, a commissioner ultimately everybody, the chain of command per se, that answers that. And so that's one thing. I think one of the other issues, and I think with the idea of the council being all on the same page, is we are in a housing crisis. And I believe there needs to be some sort of maybe directive or understanding that we are in a housing crisis. And although there are many rules across the different departments, and every department holds their rules tight and in sacrosanct, there has to be an understanding that ultimately we have to get to building houses, because if we hold too dearly to our sacrosanct ideals or ideologies based on where we work or what department or what we're protecting, we can get in an issue where things are taking longer than they should, because the fact is ultimately we need to get to housing production, and that's difficult if departments don't have that ultimate goal in mind. And that is it. Thank you so much for bringing this group together.
Ryan, thanks so much. And what you did is you gave us some really good North Star objectives as we're on the task, as the task force lands the action. And so what you made a really clear point about is it gets to a point where there needs to be a final decision. And that's what you experience. Do you experience that in all the other jurisdictions you work with, or no?
Actually, Commissioner Ryan, not as much. A lot of the jurisdictions we are in, obviously outside in the greater metro area, mostly they have almost all of the permit review is in one department. So ultimately you have a community development director that goes up to. Obviously land use is outside of that, but that process kind of finishes itself before you get into other stuff. But there's usually at least one, and oftentimes they are working directly together because you only have two different departments really conflicting.
What are often those two different departments?
A lot of it is just timing with land use that goes into the building department or the building permits. That is usually where it lies. A lot of times, since we're looking at, for example, some issues like environmental or urban tree programs and things along those times, a lot of times those are contained in the same system within the community development or economic development, usually community development department. So it allows one person to answer that question ultimately if it needs to get to that point, but usually it doesn't.
All right, that's helpful. Thank you so much.
Great feedback, Ryan.
Okay, we have Douglas McLeod next.
Douglas, you there?
He's muted.
Unmute, Doug.
Sorry. I just want to echo what Ryan said, and I'm a little bit flabbergasted to see you, Mingus, and I appreciate where you're coming from, writing down Justin's issue. If you sit down with 10 builders and you give them each a beer and you listen for an hour, we can give you 1,000, versions of how screwed up the permitting is. And if you sit down with Rob Humphrey's staff, hi Rob, and any of a half dozen of his staff could give you a one-pager on how to reform the permitting process. And if you got half that done in 3 years, it'd be more than happened in the last 20 years. So there's no lack of expertise in terms of fixing all these problems. It's essentially political. And you guys, I don't know if you know this or not, and I know you guys have to be diplomatic, but if you can't get the council on board, nothing will happen. Mingus, I know you've never run the departments you run before. You had a different career, same with you, Ryan. The directors of all these bureaus will explain to you why you can't do blankety blank and blank. They will eat you alive unless you push them. And I've seen these attempts to do permitting report reform multiple times over the last 20 years. And the council people who are new and green and enthusiastic get eaten alive. And I would just, I want to be frank, I would just suggest that this is a political problem. It's not a technical problem. And I know when, I'm just imagining when Rebecca tries to get together with her, the other bureaus, she has no authority. She knows what day it is. She knows what time it is. She has no authority over those folks. So I think that I'll shut up in a second, Ryan. I think this idea that you have a technical problem is off base. You have a political problem, and people need to be honest and open and ongoing about it, or nothing's going to happen.
Douglas, thanks for the feedback. And I understand what you're saying and where you're coming from, and I agree with your fundamental analysis. When I take a look at this broad space, I think the challenge or the problems that we are confronting now are largely a product of our commission form of government, where we've divided authority across, 5 different elected officials and who knows how many different bureaus, and there is not someone who is ultimately in charge and coordinating the system so it works effectively. I'm working very hard on changing our form of government. I think we're less than a year out. In fact, we are less than a year out from a vote on getting that done. I think amongst the many things that will get fixed when we move away from our antiquated commission form of government will be our permitting process. There are many other spaces and policy areas in the city of Portland that I think will be improved when we just modernize our government. In the meantime, number one, I should get Rob's piece of paper so we can begin to implement some of those ideas. So I'll have my staff follow up with them. And until then, I think all that Commissioner Ryan and I can really do here is work with the government that we do have and try to make it work better. So if we can break down some barriers where we can break down barriers, we should. And that's
you know what, Commissioner Rapps, I agree with some of that, but I also think that I don't care about the change. I mean, of course we're going to change the form of government, but right now you have 5 people that are voted by the entire city to focus on the top priorities that faces the city, and this is one of the top priorities. So I actually think we're in an incredible window of time to take action here. I'm well aware that there's a reason why this hasn't happened before, even though everyone's been talking about it for decades. And I also have a really strong background in continuous improvement. And that's why we brought together the composite of the room the way we did. If you noticed in the past, it was often just coming from BDS and the BDS commissioner. Well, this task force is not built like that. We have all 7 bureaus aligned. We have all 7 directors involved. We have all of the permitting managers active. They all came to the town hall last week for the employees. And we have representatives from every council office. So this is a high priority. We do not need to kick this can down the road and wait for the new form of government to show up and think that they're going to understand it any better than we do. So I'm really grateful that we have momentum right now and that we're moving this forward, and we just keep needing your feedback. We need your engagement in this process, and you need to be in it with the staff as we make this transition.
So
but anyway, I have clear eyes on what we're facing here. When I got the audit, I'm not done. When I got the audit and I heard what was presented to us, I got what the marching orders were. And that's why we're also bringing data into the equation so we can have this be a data-driven process that will move this forward. I'm with you. I just hope that you know that this is going to be different than you've experienced in the past. Thanks.
Thank you.
So we don't have any other hands raised at the moment. Would anyone like to ask a question? Oh, Katie Martin. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Katie Martin. I am on the board of directors of the Oregon Solar and Storage Industries Association. We represent solar installers, distributors, and those folks supporting the solar and storage industry here in Oregon statewide. We have expressed to multiple folks in both BDS and commissioners that the solar permitting process in Portland is now known as the hardest place to get a solar permit across the US. It used to be LA, it is now Portland, Oregon. And just want to express the need to address those permits in particular because of the goals that the city has around sustainability, and also the Portland Clean Energy Fund that is going to inject a lot of money into specifically the solar industry, and is being watched by I think everyone nationwide on how that sort of money generating tax can work. And if these projects start coming through and can't get permits, it's going to be pretty difficult to say that that was a successful program, all within the same city governments. We are asking for same day residential prescriptive solar permits, and streamlining of commercial and non-prescriptive, so engineered solar projects as well. We have been working with a task force for solar specifically, and I was involved in a workshop last week. Unfortunately, we did the same survey, solar specific, shared our concerns, shared our comments, and that workshop really fell flat in the asks of the city for contractors to take incredible risks in order to build solar within the city of Portland. So I would just bring it back to this group, Commissioner Mapps, Commissioner Ryan, thank you for having this, and would really like to put solar on the map as one of those industries that is incredibly hard to sustain in Portland right now. A lot of our members have just decided not to build in Portland at all at this point.
Thanks, Katie. I appreciate the input on that. I'll tell you the truth. I haven't looked closely at the solar issue, but I promise you I will.
Katie, I know that BDS and our conversations have been working really hard on this, and you've heard other themes tonight, but you're bringing up some issues that might be specific to solar. Can you explain what those are that's different than some of the other themes that we're hearing tonight?
There's some of the same themes, honestly, customer service and the time it takes to get a permit. For residential solar permits, we could historically get one over the counter, 1 or 2 a day over the counter. Those have turned into weeks and months. There's software available. There's a national initiative right now called Solar App that would allow City of Portland to take in these permits and approve them within a day. That's what we're looking for. So really time, customer service, timeliness of permits, customer service in that process. Some of the same themes, but mostly speediness and consistency in the process, and consistency in code interpretation.
I think you brought up code though a couple times. So do you think there's something in that where the codes have changed and there's backlog of the old codes? There just seems to be some issues around when we upgrade our new codes, we still are stymied by some of the older ones. I'm not trying to put words in your mouth. I keep hearing about solar. I live in Portland, Oregon. It's all about being the green capital of the universe. And it's been such a puzzle to me on why solar seems to be one of our biggest challenges in terms of permitting.
Yeah, that's a great question. We've basically had the same solar code since 2010. That code was put together by stakeholders at a state level, all stakeholders. And that code really hasn't changed. It was its own standalone code. And now it is part of the OSSC. And the verbiage hasn't changed that much at all since 2010. So really what's changed, I think, is how many new faces and new bureaus now have their hands in it. And the code interpretation, the code is statewide, but really Portland is the one where you can get a different code interpretation than any other jurisdiction in the state.
All right, so it's really similar to the other themes we've heard.
That's correct.
All right, thanks, Katie.
Thank you.
Thank you, Katie. We are going to go to Ed Bruin next and then Amy Ruiz on deck.
Hi, this is Ed. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Awesome. Hey, thanks, guys. I think this presentation is fantastic. To the commissioners, I really appreciate your commitment to try to make this better, and we're all hopeful that it's going to work. I've got a question for you. So we've done, over the last 20 years, we've done a lot of projects with the city of Portland. And over the last year, or 2 years, basically, because of COVID, our permit time has gone from six to 8 months to 8 to 10 months. And I believe there were layoffs at the BDS sometime over the last year. And you know, probably Rob could help me with this, but there were layoffs down there. Last year we had 2 projects. Permit fees on each of them was about $500,000. And I know that it's an economic engine there. When we write those checks, when we get our permit, we write those checks. That money goes into your accounts. So when I hear that there aren't enough permits to pay for our staff, we have to let people go. So your permits, instead of taking 6 months, it's now going to take 10 months because we're shorthanded. It seems from a business standpoint that I'd like to get that $1 million in 6 months instead of 10 months. So what is happening down there that causes the layoffs?
I'll start with this because I fought really hard, Ed, and was quite successful of not experiencing what we did after the Great Recession in 2008 and 2010. There were some people that were helpful enough to actually come to a city council meeting and have my back when we avoided that. And I also appreciate that the other council offices agreed that we could not have the layoffs hit BDS like they have in the past when we've had our fees, because it's a fee for service run bureau. So we had to tap into general fund and also some of the rescue dollars at a rate that was unprecedented for this bureau. And so I want to again thank that the council agreed up to that in last year's budget. I do know across the city we're having some workforce issues in terms of some morale and people moving on. But I really would just need to take your specific concern, and I will continue to talk with Director Esau. And I liked one of the notes I saw in the chat. I usually don't read the chat because it's like someone's interrupting you when you're trying to focus. But I couldn't help to see everyone say, I agree with Lauren, I agree with Lauren. And the fact is, I hope that you've noticed that we are including all of the leadership in the task force, and they're all very engaged, and also their direct partners. And that's what I found is different about this task force than those that we've done in the past. But I want to make sure that we listen to those comments, because you need to experience customer service coming from all 7 bureaus, not just one. And anyway, so I just want to add that comment since I kept saying I agree with Lauren. Thanks.
And then David Sedaris is up afterwards and might be our last person.
Thank you so much. Amy Ruiz here on behalf of Oregon Smart Growth, and thank you for hosting this town hall and for digging into this work. it's something we've been asking for and eagerly awaiting my entire tenure with the organization. I did want to ask about, we really appreciate the goal based on cutting the timeline down by 1/3. And I remember when that was touted in the press this summer, I think the headline was something like, getting the 100-day wait for a permit cut down by 1/3. I just wanted to ask more about what's being measured there, because I know the response from our membership was, wow, if I could get a permit in 100 days, that would be amazing. So there was some thinking that maybe that was not considering the intake part of the process or the issuance part of the process, maybe just from when it was officially considered submitted until it was approved. So I wanted to see if that was maybe the case and flag that we actually see a lot of problems on those 2 steps in particular, with it just taking an inordinate amount of time for something to be considered fully submitted, and then a perplexing amount of time for something to go from ready to be issued to actually handed over.
Oops, I'll start with this a little bit, Commissioner Mapson. Amy, it's good to see you. And I know you have a really deep 360 perspective since you've been on this side of the aisle, if you will. I do know that I don't think it included intake. And I know there's some members of the task force here that could correct me if that's not true. So it is cutting down the timeline. But one reason we wanted to focus on the initial intake and establishing customer service on the front end and that relationship was to then speed up the process once it was approved and it was in the system. So I think that's what I picked up on so far, and when we get into the weeds. I also want to, on an earlier point that was made about layoffs, I think sometimes everyone just again assumes it's all about BDS. And so you're the same people that realize that it's not just BDS, but it's 7 bureaus. So some of the permitting bureaus are under-resourced. And that's something that I think the task force, that's something I know the task force is lifting up, that when we resource permitting, we can't just resource it specifically in BDS, but in all of the different bureaus. So at this moment, I just wanted to say that that's been a discussion that's come up frequently at the task force. So your layoff question might have been beyond BDS. Thanks for allowing me to go back to a previous question. Takes me a while, a lot going on. What do you think, Commissioner Mapp?
I was going to kick this one maybe over to staff. That was a vaguely technical question. Do we have a precise answer? I don't know who that would go to in terms of what we're, Amy, in general, I think the instinct here was to, or one of our strategies is to try to make sure that the permits that provide early technical assistance, so that the permits that we ultimately are reviewing are relatively clean and can move straightforward, or at least move in an expedited fashion once they actually hit someone's desk.
Ken Ray provided it in the chat. Isn't that great?
Oh,
Yeah.
I don't see that. What did Ken say?
Well, I haven't clicked on it, but he did confirm that it covers the permit setup to the approved issue. And you all have it in the chat. It's going to be a lot better than hearing Commissioner Maps and I try to interpret it in real time. But I really appreciate you, Ken, for putting that in the chat. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Ken.
Okay, David.
Ken, you have a new question.
It's David's turn.
All right, thank you. I had a suggestion about the public improvements. Currently, it's being treated as if everything is a custom project. We hire a civil engineer to pretend like there are no sidewalks anywhere in Portland, and that the city of Portland does not know what they want. And and the reality is there's certain things that could be done, like you can have one of these 10 configurations and get permits today, or if you meet these standards, like, you know, if you're a flat lot and you have a 50-foot right of way and we want a tree lawn, and here you go, you can walk out the door with your permits today. That's the city of Portland deciding what they want to see built and actually providing a set of plans that can walk out the door. But instead, they pretend like they've never seen a sidewalk before, and we have to educate them on what a sidewalk looks like from every angle. It's ridiculous. And so there are some situations where if you if you're in the Southwest Hills and there's a ton of rainwater coming down the street, and you have to control that might need some more thought put into it. But generally speaking, there are lots of other properties that do not need that attention, and their resources could be focused on the ones that do. That's one suggestion for whoever wants to take it. And so we have suffered from the slow permitting process, and it's only gotten slower. And I hear that you're wanting to change things, and I'm hopeful, but I'm not seeing if you have 5 commissioners and they're all in charge of 5 different departments or more, having one person come in and be the chief of all of those would be putting one commissioner in charge, basically. Or so there has to be one person that's overseeing all of them. And I'm not seeing that happening. Having a consultant is great, and they can make individual suggestions to the different department heads, but there's still no teeth in it, just like Douglas was saying, is that it's a political issue. You have 5 heads, 5 subheads, and there's no one to answer to. And we're caught in the middle, in the crossfire. So I'll take your answers. I'll mute my microphone. Thank you.
Well, thanks, David. And I hear you. This is challenging for a reason. One of the reasons is this coordination problem, where we have at least 7 different bureaus involved with issuing permits. I think that's 4/5 of council, getting everyone on the same page and deciding who the ultimate arbiter is an awfully difficult thing to do in our form of government, which is specifically designed to keep us from doing that. I think that is one of the thorny problems of this initiative needs to face, and this is not the only policy space where we face this problem, but I get it. If we're going to be efficient and coordinate our services, we have to have a mechanism for doing that. And one of the realities right now is we don't really have a particularly good system for doing that. So that I view as being the fundamental work ahead for this task force, and for, frankly, the city in general. I also want to say, I see that we're at time. I want to thank everyone for being part of this conversation today. I know you're here because you are deeply invested in this issue, and it's frustrating, and it's been frustrating for far too long. I do want to let you know that we hear you. We understand that this is something that we have to get right, both for your sakes and, frankly, for the sake of our city. Until we figure out how to build in Portland, we're not going to be able to grow here in Portland. I also want to assure you that this is part of an ongoing conversation. So this, the talk that we had today is the beginning and not an end. One of the things that I can make the commitment to you to do moving forward is to keep you looped in on the progress of what's happening over at the Permits Task Force. I suspect we probably have your emails, and so maybe my office or Commissioner Ryan's office or someone else can send you quarterly updates on the work that on the ideas that we're developing. I also want to say, I believe sometime in the new year, some ideas from the Permits Task Force should be coming before council, either as a work session or as things that we need to move on. I'll definitely make sure that you are aware of those, and would very much invite everyone on this call to participate in that city council meeting when it comes up, and we'll make sure that you know when it's coming up. And with that, why don't I hand it over to Commissioner Ryan?
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Mapps. I just want to echo that it's on January 25th. Mark your calendars. It's a work session on permitting. It'll be very helpful to have you in attendance, not just to observe, but to testify, or we will figure out some invited testimony. But this will eventually become something that we'll bring back to the city council. We need to bring it into that body. But I also want you to acknowledge how hard the current 7 bureaus and their directors that are doing permitting on the ground are working on this. I've seen collaboration and dialogue amongst different bureaus that I've heard from all of them that they haven't had that opportunity to be in the same room with in years. And so that is a part of the continuous improvement process, is to make sure that the composite actually will lead you to success and nothing happens in isolation. So the good news is we're not denying the problem. We have the right people focused on it, And then we have some tough decisions that will eventually come to city council, and we will need all of you to weigh in. We'll also do continuous customer service updates, and we will always be responsive to those. And we look forward to having a community-wide dashboard that's digestible that you can all see. So we have that community-wide accountability as well that all of you deserve. So I just want to thank Commissioner Mapps for including me in one of the town halls. We will have more of them. I saw some suggestion about splitting them up between residential and commercial. That's a pretty good idea. And we can get into more details. And we will include staff when we get into those types of details as well. Anyway, thank you so much for showing up on a Monday night in the month of December. How many people are on this call, Commissioner Mapps? Over 70? Wow. So this is a big issue. This is almost as intense as the meetings I go to on Safe Trust Villages. Yes, they're all connected. Anyway, I hope you all have a good evening. Happy holidays.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good night. Happy holidays if we don't get a chance to see you before then.